thank you everybody for joining us today for this presentation with our wonderful speakers, Tessa and Ailsa. Before we get to the formalities, I'll just start by acknowledging the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and communities. And I pay my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and to elders past and present. A quick reminder or a quick sort of plug, if you're not already part of the Australian Evaluation Society and you would like to join us, details there at the link. My name is Stephanie Carter. I'm representing the SA Committee of the Australian Evaluation Society today, and very shortly I will hand you over to Tessa and Ailsa, who are going to talk to us about the principles for working with people with lived experience. So Dr. Tessa Zirnsak, hopefully I've said that right, Tessa, is a lived experience mental health researcher at La Trobe Uni, and Ailsa is a lived experience researcher, author and peer workforce leader, and you can read their little bios there on the screen. But that's enough from me. I will hand it over to Tessa and to Ailsa to take us through today's session. And if you've got any questions, do feel free to pop them in the chat as we go, and we'll get to those later on as well.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. So, yeah, that was a great introduction. Nothing to add. So Ailsa's going to start first by kind of talking through why lived experience involvement in research and evaluation is so important. Ailsa has 25 years of experience, and the last 4 of those have been working with me because I've only been on the scene for the last 4 years. So she's going to take us through that kind of, I guess, the kind of principle or the values for why we do this practice. And then I'm going to take over and talk about some of the kind of practical considerations and what good practice looks like. And then we should have a decent amount of time at the end for questions, because I know that, you know, when we talk about this topic, people come with all different kinds of assumptions and expectations and needs, and I want to make sure that we, you know, that we're kind of meeting the questions that you've come with today. So Ailsa, I will hand over to you to kick us off.
Thanks, Dr. Tessa. Thank you, Stephanie. I'm coming to you from Gimoy Wallaby Digi Jabbagai land, sorry, Yindinji land. That's in far north Queensland, in Cairns. I'd also like to acknowledge people with lived experience and living experience of mental health services and the ongoing platforming that they've given us to be able to do this sort of research. Some have been faced some significant barriers, and we still do, but they're not the same as they were when they were building the foundations. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about beyond inclusion, which is building genuine partnerships with lived experience in research and evaluation. Many of us wear multiple identities, mental health challenges, disability, trauma, and marginalisation. And we have other roles, including as researchers and evaluators. There is a quiet shift happening across the research and evaluation landscape, one that's gathering momentum. What once felt like the exception is fast becoming the expectation. Lived experience involvement, whether in health, mental health, disability, or social services, or across our communities and our organisations and society in general, is no longer seen as an optional add-on, but as a necessary part of ethical, rigorous research and evaluation. Funding bodies like the National Health and Medical Research Council and the Medical Research Future Fund have introduced, I keep getting them mixed up because we all refer to them as the in the letters. What's it called, Tessa? When you talk about the letters rather than the full words?
Acronyms.
Acronyms, that's it. Yep. So have introduced streams requiring lived experience involvement in grant applications. Some journals now require authors to justify the exclusion of lived experience expertise in study design. And yet, while these shifts reflect progress, the question remains, how do we move beyond tokenism to true meaningful involvement? How do we ensure that this new norm honors the values that we actually claim to hold? So, why lived experience? I want to pause here and reflect on why lived experience involvement is so important. For too long, research and evaluation has been done to people, not with them. Decisions about what questions to ask, what methods to use, and how to interpret findings have often been made without the input of those most affected. This has led to blind spots, harmful assumptions, overlooked insights, and recommendations that fail to land in the real world. In mental health, for example, we've seen decades of research into treatments and systems that still leave many people feeling unheard, unsupported, or even worse, harmed. Lived experience brings knowledge that's grounded in reality. It offers insight into what works, what doesn't, and why. It challenges dominant narratives and opens space for alternative ways of knowing. In short, it makes research better. But even more than that, it's a matter of justice. People have the right to be involved in decisions about their lives, including research and evaluation that shapes policies, services, and funding priorities. Okay, so we're going to talk about moving from involvement to partnerships, values at the core. So what does it mean to make this involvement meaningful? At the heart of it are values. When we talk about involving lived experience, we're not just talking about adding a tick box to a project plan. We're talking about redistributing power, sharing decision-making, and valuing different forms of knowledge equally. Here are some of the values I believe need to guide this work. Number one, respect. Valuing lived experience expertise as equal to academic or professional expertise. Some of us have degrees as well. This includes respecting different ways of knowing, including personal, embodied, and cultural knowledge. Two, equity. Ensuring that people with lived experience have the resources, support, and remuneration they need to participate fully. This means not expecting voluntary labour or unpaid contributions in spaces where others are paid. Sometimes people are on limited incomes, and it can be really problematic if they're not paid. And it's unfair. What's it? Same work, same pay. Three, transparency. Being clear about roles, decision-making processes, and expectations. Too often, lived experience partners are invited in without a clear sense of what power they actually hold. Four, flexibility. Recognizing that different people bring different capacities, needs, and ways of working. Capacities not being the legal term for whether you're sane or not, or able to be determined sane or not. Capacity as in abilities. This might mean adapting timelines, methods, or communication styles to ensure genuine participation. And 5, accountability, not just to funders and institutions, but to the communities we work with and serve. So practically, what does it look like in action? I want to share some of the ways these values are being put into practice in the projects I'm involved in. I work alongside Dr. Tessa Zirnsak and Professor Chris May-Lee, collaborating as a lived experience researcher, designer, and chief investigator across multiple national initiatives. One was the Police Apprehension Project. We were examining the cultural safety and legalities surrounding police responses to mental health crises, especially the over-reliance on police in situations where care, not control, is needed. Lived experience is central here, not only sharing stories, but shaping research questions, influencing how findings are interpreted, excuse me, and challenging assumptions about safety and risk. I also work with these brilliant people on the With You training development for legal practitioners. This is a trauma-informed training developed with and for legal practitioners, focusing on how to support people with lived experience of mental health challenges and trauma in legal settings. Lived experience isn't just an advisory voice here, it's in the DNA of the training, ensuring that justice processes don't re-traumatize. Oh, I'm very sorry. But instead create space for healing and fairness. Number 3, the Equally Well consumer resource for GPs and consumers. In partnership with Equally Well, we created a resource co-designed with consumers and GPs to bridge the gaps between physical and mental health care. It's about shared knowledge, making sure GPs hear directly from those of us with lived experience, so care is tailored, respectful, and holistic, and an agreement is formed. 4, designing and proposing research nationally. Together with university and sector partners, we've been designing and leading research proposals that are being taken up nationally. Because when lived experience is at the table from the start, projects become not just about people, but with people. I've also been a chief investigator, just beginning, where I'll lead research teams where lived experience expertise is positioned alongside academic and clinical leadership, not beneath it. These examples show that lived experience involvement is adaptable. Sometimes it's co-design, sometimes it's leadership, and sometimes it's about bridging disciplines, but it always holds to those core values: respect, equity, and transparency. There are some challenges and tensions. So let's get down to the real talk. Even in these projects, tensions arise. Timelines don't always suit deep co-design processes. Different knowledge systems, academic, clinical, lived, sometimes clash. In one project, for example, we had to negotiate definitions of evidence. The research team leaned towards statistical models. Lived experience experts lean towards storytelling, nuance, and context. But we held space for these conversations because that's where the real partnership happens. We also faced challenges around remuneration models, navigating university systems that aren't built for peer researchers or lived experience consultants, but we kept pushing for fairness. The emerging norm is more than compliance. The NHMRC and MRFF and leading journals aren't just asking for lived experience involvement to tick a box. They're recognizing that research is better when it includes people it impacts. But the risk is that involvement becomes compliance-driven rather than values-driven. I've seen both, but I've also seen what happens when researchers, evaluators, and lived experience experts come together as equals. It's not always neat or easy, but it's richer, more relevant, and more ethical. Hope for the future. Co-creating knowledge. So what does this emerging norm offer us? For evaluators, the chance to ask different questions, measure what really matters, and create evaluations that actually reflect lived realities. For researchers, there's a much deeper insight, stronger ethics, and better impact. For people with lived experience, not just a seat at the table, but real influence, shaping research, policy, and practice. The future of research and evaluation isn't about inviting lived experience in as a guest. It's about building the house together. I stand here, sit actually, not just as a researcher, but as someone who's lived the consequences of research done to people rather than with them. But I've also experienced the power of being a co-creator of knowledge, and I know how transformative that can be. Let's keep moving forward toward a world where lived experience isn't just involved, it's leading, shaping, co-creating, and where research and evaluation becomes tools for justice and collective learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ailsa. That was a fantastic kind of overview of the I guess some of the principles and values that underpin what I'm going to share, which is in some ways, touching on many of the themes that Ailsa's identified, but I'm going to kind of come at it from a more of a kind of researcher perspective, because I'm often the person kind of coordinating these groups and working with lived experience experts, outside of kind of my experience or outside of the university to sort of, I guess, make sure that they do feel heard and seen in the research. So I've got some slides, so I'm going to share my screen. Can you see that okay, Stephanie?
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much. Cool. So, yeah, I guess I'll just jump right in. So I'm on Wurundjeri country, and all this work was done on Wurundjeri country, and I'd like to acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that this land was stolen and never ceded. So there's been some research into lived experience engagement mainly in research, but also, in some evaluation projects as well, although the grey literature is a bit more, I guess, harder to kind of measure. But what we kind of got from looking at the research is the main finding is that Australia is actually well behind other countries like the United States and the UK in terms of engaging lived experience researchers in their work. So I led a systematic review. I don't have the citation there, but I can definitely provide it if you reach out to me. It was published last year, and we found that there were no studies published in the first half of 2021 in any nursing journal that had lived experience involvement. In another systematic review, we found that only 17 studies published in the first half of 2021. So of all clinical trials, we found only 17 had evidence of, I've got PPIE there. These slides I sometimes recycle these slides. So that's a shorthand for patient and public involvement. So that's consumer involvement. So that was 17 out of 324 in the first half of 2021 that had lived experience involvement, which is the equivalent of 1 in 20. But we know that in the British Medical Journal, it's slightly more than 1 in 10. So, we're a little bit behind in terms of our capacity, but, in terms of our capacity to really kind of do this work. And I think that that's a good opportunity for Australians to really kind of become leaders, I guess, become national leaders in this practice. So that's a little bit of the background. But I'm also going to talk a little bit about how to do it. So I mean, Ailsa covered this off really well. I mean, the only thing that I'd probably like to add in terms of, you know, what we're talking about is making sure that I guess that we're recognizing consumers as active stakeholders in the services that they're receiving, and stakeholders that have knowledge of that service as well. And often it can actually really improve research processes and make research processes much more straightforward, because, you know, they'll know how to recruit, they'll know what the people in the service do. You know, like, sorry, they'll know what kinds of ways are the best to contact people in that service, for example. They, you know, they might have professional networks that you can rely on to kind of support support kind of participant recruitment. They might be able to provide context in the analysis. So there's a lot of really strong reasons, yeah, I guess, to include them. Ailsa's given a really good overview of what it is. If you have any questions about that, you can pop it in the chat, because, you know, it's sort of important for the next the next little bit. So do let me know if I'm going too fast or anything's not clear, but we will have time for questions shortly. But look, just in terms of the, you know, like how you can engage consumers or lived experience experts. There are lots of different ways, and this slide has a table on it, and what I have done is this is a really bastardized version of Indigo Daya's participation letter, and I've got the reference down there, and I can also provide it as an email if you contact me. But this is kind of like the main types of lived experience involvement that we see in research.
I don't know. I know that I mentioned
I'm so sorry. Someone has their mic.
Carmen said, "Oh, that's be a really good thing to
I'm muted.
for us all to have access to."
Sorry, could everyone just please mute if you're not speaking? Oh.
My previous job and the various teams around there.
Yeah. So sorry. So yeah. So there are all these different kind of levels, and Indigo. I actually know her quite well, but yeah, Indigo Daya, who wrote this, there's more than this. There's even further up. But the best that we've kind of seen in research has been co-design at this point, and there's going to be some reasons for that, which I'll go into. But this is just kind of like a really truncated version, so that you can kind of see, you know, what's being done and how to do it. So, you know, in a very kind of in a very limited way. Yeah, sorry, I was just checking the chat. So when we're talking about informing people, there's a clear kind of difference in how consumers or lived experience experts are seen as compared to the research team, and they're quite separate. And the research team will make all the decisions about the research and then kind of let consumers know about it. And usually that happens right at the end. And I wouldn't really consider that to be a kind of lived experience involvement, but it is, you know, it is something that you might like consider. I mean, sometimes member checking can be a bit like this, which is when you check with people, you know, what did you think of these findings from this research that you participated in? Because, you know, we think about it that way because that's usually kind of talking to participants, not lived experience experts as researchers. But you know, I think there is a bit of blurring, but what we kind of do see more of is consultation, which is when the research team kind of retains power over the research and decision-making authority, and brings in lived experience people, asks their advice. It should be done early enough for the influence to be meaningful. And really, I think that consultation should only be done if there's meaningful scope within the research for that consultation to influence what's happening. So I don't think it counts as consultation if you bring people in, they give you advice and you decide not to take it. I don't think that that's ethical. And it also can be really damaging for ongoing relationships with lived experience experts. So, you know, I think like I've worked with lived experience experts sort of for my whole career, which hasn't been that long yet because I only just finished my PhD. But, you know, like, so I met Ailsa through an EOI that I put out, and I didn't know her when she, you know, I was looking for lived experience experts to work with. I put out an EOI and Ailsa responded, and I didn't know her at all. And that project wrapped up more than a year ago now, but we're still working together. And I think that part of that is because I've never asked Ailsa for advice on something where I can't take her advice, or I've never asked her for something and then not listen to what she's had to say. But as a consumer researcher myself, I have been in positions where people have asked me my opinion and then not listen to what I've had to say, which, you know, there can be reasons for that, but it's very damaging to the relationships. And I think it needs to be kind of worked through if you can't, you know, like those relationships need to be worked through if you can't take on, if you ask someone, a lived experience expert, for advice and don't take it. I think there needs to be kind of a justification for why you've decided not to take that advice. And in the past, I've been in positions where I have received advice from lived experience experts and I haven't been able to action it. For example, with the consumer resource, which was something that Ailsa and I worked on together. It's like you can Google equally well consumer resource. It's like a health resource that Ailsa talked about for people to take to their doctor. People, you know, the lived experience, well, the co-design group said to me, you know, they wanted it translated into other languages and they wanted it to have graphics and videos. And we just didn't have the budget. And so I just kind of took that problem back to them. And I was like, look, we just don't have the budget. What do you think? And then where we settled was we wrote formal recommendations back to the funder that they should expand it to include those things, which was really good for me as a researcher because it meant that I was able to kind of preserve the relationship with the group and make sure that they were getting their voice heard. But also, you know, I was being clear and direct about my limitations, which meant that the group were able to kind of accept my limitations because I was really clear about what they were. So I think, you know, I think that that's yeah. So I can see Amrita's popped a question in, but I might come to that one at the end, Amrita, if that's okay. So engagement would be, you know, having lived experience experts as stakeholders. So the traditional research team still had, like, stakeholders in the project, sorry. So the traditional research team would still hold the power, but there might be, you know, like there might be an advisory group that have a little bit more power than just kind of consultation. So they might have more scope in terms of what they're able to recommend. There might be a lived experience representative in the research team, which is something that I've done in my role in the past. And this is required for a project to have lived experience engagement. Lived experience experts need to be brought in from the beginning. It could be after funding, but from the beginning, because it's not really engagement if you just bring them in. We don't really consider it to be engagement if they just kind of come in towards the middle or the end because they haven't had that capacity to influence how the study is conducted. Because, you know, most of the time when we're writing grants or preparing to do an evaluation of a service, we do the methodology. That's the first thing we do. And then it can be quite hard to shift that methodology once you've decided it. So it's really important to, you know, if it's going to be meaningful engagement, it's important to have people in the room at the start when there's still scope to influence the overall, like the big picture of what lived experience involvement is. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about is co-design, which is, I think co-design is really tricky in a research and evaluation environment, often because the kinds of, the way that the academic norms can be quite inflexible. And I think, you know, research practices can be quite inflexible. And I have done, on the consumer resource project, we did determine that was co-designed, but that was a decision that was made by that co-design group and not by the research team. So the power sat with them for them to tell us what level they thought they were engaged at. Because, you know, they're considered partners in the research. And so we're not kind of telling them, oh, you know, we involved you in co-design, because if they don't feel that they've had that decision making, then it's not co-design. It's very hard to do I'm going to talk about grants a little bit later, but it can be very tricky to do co-design because people really need to be involved at the beginning because they need to, you know, have kind of 50% of the power in terms of making decisions about what the research is going to look like. But often you design what the research is going to look like before you have any money to pay anyone, which means that either you can't involve lived experience experts in the design phase, which is something that, you know, that's something I've seen before where we just haven't had the money. And so we just haven't been able to do it because we can't ask people to work for free. And then but then, you know, with the consumer resource, we were able to so the consumer resource kind of had that problem where we decided what was, you know, we'd made some key decisions about what was going to happen before we got the funding, and then we got the funding, and then we engaged the co-design group. And the co-design group raised that as a problem at the time. But what we're able to do is really give them pretty much all of the decisions to make in a very supported way, where I was, kind of talking about the pros and cons throughout the rest of the project. And then it kind of worked out like 50-50. So by the end, they were like, all right, yeah, this is kind of fair. But it was really, really challenging, and it's not easy. I'm happy to answer questions about that later on, but but some of the constraints around it are really kind of structural. And I think it's important when you're working with lived experience experts to be really clear about what's going to be a structural barrier for you, and so that they're aware of that, and then negotiate together how you're going to navigate those barriers to make sure that the people are getting what they need out of the research. Cool. All right, I'm going to go to my, I'm just going to do a quick time check to make sure I've got enough time for questions. But I'm nearly at the end. So, I think the only thing with this slide that I wanted to talk about, because we did talk about planning in the last slide, is around pay. Now, I work for La Trobe University, which is a large institution with very cemented policies around how we pay lived experience, or how we pay anyone really external. And it can be really challenging. We have very strict policies around. So in the past, what we've done is we've offered to onboard people as casual staff members. Some people don't like that because it messes with their disability support pensions, which can have an ongoing impact beyond my engagement with them. Like, it can sometimes make it very difficult to get back. So sometimes people have asked to be paid in gift cards for those kinds of bureaucratic reasons. But then there are, really kind of stringent limitations around, what gift cards can be purchased and how they can be used. And I think that that's an area where it's just really important to be clear and upfront about what you can actually do, keeping in mind that people should be paid for their work, and there isn't really a circumstance in which it's acceptable to have lived experience experts come in without being paid. And if, I've sometimes found myself in that position where I have lived experience experts who want to contribute and I want them to contribute, but I can't pay them. And so, I just have to be really direct about, I can't pay them, and I therefore don't think that they should do it because, they should have their own kind of, like, I'm getting paid, so it's not fair. And I don't want to kind of contribute to a culture where we diminish the value of lived experience because an individual who wants to work with me says they'll do it for free. I don't think that that's an ethical tension that I think we all need to work through in the space, but that's something that I think is really kind of, I don't know, that's kind of quite front of mind for me. And, I'm not sure if that's something that other people have encountered. Yeah, and I think, Ailsa said about how it's important to make sure that, you can extend timelines and you can change things based on the advice that you're given. I think that's really about respect and, making sure that when you're involving people in research, you're actually listening to what they have to say and responding to it in a meaningful way. Yeah, so look, I think some of the soft skills that I think are important to kind of make this process successful around sort of being flexible and being trusting and just being really, really clear about what you can't do. Yeah, so look, but I think this is sort of all that I kind of wanted to, like, that's the main part of the content that I wanted to go through. I think the main takeaway that I wanted for this presentation is that lived experience involvement is really possible, and you can kind of do it at any of those levels, really, except in form. So, when I was talking about my table here, consultation is a perfectly reasonable methodology that's very, very kind of easy to do because, the lived experience experts don't necessarily have the power to kind of, extend the timeline too much or whatever. So if you don't have a lot of funding or if you're very new in the space, this can be a great place to start. But we need to be seeing more research that's at this kind of co-design level. Because, it's happening, it's a part of the movement in evaluation and research, and we're not going to be able to get away without doing it for much longer. So that's the end of my formal presentation, but Ailsa and I wanted to make sure that we had plenty of time for questions. So I know there are a couple in the chat. I will,
Yeah, I'm throwing Amrita's question to you.
okay, good. So I think so there can be overlap between the levels of engagement, I think. So, sorry, Amrita's question is, can there be overlap between the levels of engagement, or have the levels of engagement, evolved in the life of the project, and what could influence this? So I think with the consumer resource, there were times that where the group were like, this isn't co-design, and then by the end they decided it was, because we were able to give over a lot more decision-making power when they said that they weren't happy. Oh, I mean, they didn't really say they weren't happy. They just said it wasn't co-design. So that was fine.
We
So
all put
I
our
think
hands up
yeah.
for analysis and domain decisions and doing the back stuff, the data stuff. It was really good. Some people had never seen that side of research before. So Tessa gave us the opportunity to do that in a way that we were increasing our skills and our abilities and our confidence in doing those sorts of things. And that stopped the project going off on a tangent from what was necessary or important for the end outcome for us. Sorry, Tessa, I interrupted. Mm.
Yeah, no, look, no, I think that's a great point. So I think sorry, I'm just collecting my
It was
thoughts.
about the levels of engagement, and you were
Oh, yeah.
talking about, yeah.
But I think what influenced that in that example was that, I called my boss and I was like, they're saying they're not co-design. And he was like, okay, well, every decision from now on they make. And I think that was what, I think what the influencing factor was that we turned over more power.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And your boss that you're talking about is Chris May-Lee.
yes. Yeah.
And he has been just amazing, training us all, and then hands off, which is such a beautiful way of learning and developing and growing. It's just beautiful. Mm.
Yeah. So look, there's a question here, Ailsa, or a comment rather, that I think is quite related to what you've said, and I'd actually like to hear your perspective on it. So, someone's written in the chat, don't underestimate that volunteering to do a meaningful piece of research can be beneficial to someone's recovery as well. And you talked about how, I mean, I know you didn't really talk about recovery, but you did talk about how you got to develop some skills
Yeah.
when we've been working together.
Yeah.
Do you have any further thoughts on that?
Would you do the work without being paid? I think that's a probably, it's very nice to think that we might have recovery from it, but the actual proof in the pudding is respect and value and self-worth. And if your self-worth is only that you find some way forward, that's not very much. I don't know if that's helpful, but I feel pretty strongly about it.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I
Rita's
think.
got a hand up.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Amrita.
Sorry, I just thought I'd jump in just because I did put a comment below that. And like I have, as I've said, I've contributed to research as a volunteer. Usually it's for um been a participant in honors students research or research where it's like maybe not going to take me more than an hour to fill out a survey or do an interview. If it's an ongoing thing though, where there's a commitment, a time commitment, this could be up to 3 years for some people, I don't think that anyone should be asked to do that on a voluntary basis. And that goes towards a lot of the points that Ailsa made around, people are giving up their time. What is the value? How are we valuing people's time? And they are also providing their expertise, lived experience
Yep.
and expertise. So I
So
just, yeah,
intellectual property is
absolutely.
That's an extractive process if you're not giving people something for their time and knowledge and expertise. Yep. And I don't think anybody would accept that themselves. So yeah, that it's quite offensive at times to be sitting at really high level tables with people who are all being paid an absolute squillion, and you're getting $30 or be thankful for the biscuits and coffee. It's not okay. It really isn't. And we can contribute and save you money and time and effort and develop relationships and become essential parts of your lives.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that I'm kind of thinking about is benefit. So, because I kind of have my foot in two camps, in that I'm a consumer and a lived experience person. But, so recently I was working on a grant application with Ailsa for something else, and we were talking about pay, and and how I was going to kind of fund their support on the, because I didn't have funding, and so we were trying to work that out. And Ailsa's being really nice to me, and kind of and so are some of the other lived experience people were all being really nice about it. And I was kind of like, well, if we get this grant, it'll be because you helped me, and that'll be so good for my career. And so it doesn't feel fair then that I would get something that's good for my career through lived experience involvement, but those who would be involved might walk away with just the experience. But I'm not sure. Anyway, sorry. You've got your hand up. Yes.
Good, Quinn.
Yeah. Hi, Dave. Hi, my name is
Hi.
Reburn. And I was the one that put the comment in there about the volunteer aspect of. I come from, like, I have lived experience. I was addicted to gambling and developed lots of mental health issues. I work for the Department of Health. I've got a PhD in relapse prevention. But I know that in the cycle of people actually wanting to get involved, there is a phase, and it's very early. And I agree with, I think, Stephanie, who said that, it depends a bit on the time frame, but there's a phase where people want to give back. So and this is maybe more prominent in addiction lived experience, because they feel like they want to give something and they don't expect to get paid. And I think if you talk about co-design, co-design is the phase where sometimes things are not set in stone, where people want to really just get it right. And I feel that that's valuable contribution, and if you don't have funding at that stage, I think we should still harvest the knowledge.
So for you, sorry, I didn't get your name. What is your name?
My name is Gabby, like Gabrielle Byrne.
Yes. Hi, Gabby.
Yeah.
What that would be okay for you to do that, but it's not okay for somebody else. And it's not okay for us to say that somebody else would appreciate just the function of giving back, because we all give back through using personal stories and harm and experiences that are associated with a lack of power, and that's a very extractive process. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm not trying to correct you, but I am trying to say that it's not up to me to say that somebody else should not receive because they get a benefit, and that benefit is to give back, because we give back at all stages.
Well, I agree. And I'm not saying that you're wrong and I'm right. All I'm saying is I observed in 20 years of working in recovery with people that they want to connect with others if you provide them with an opportunity to do that. and
Yes.
at that particular time you don't have the money, I think it shouldn't be,
Prohibited.
some of your
Yeah.
research wouldn't have gone ahead if
Yeah.
you would have, you didn't have the funding at the time. So I think
Yeah.
sometimes, we
No,
all
yeah.
these things.
But I think nowadays it's an expectation.
I
So if I
agree.
could just jump in, Gabby, I think what you've said is really thoughtful, and maybe I should have been more thoughtful in what I said in my presentation. So thank you so much for raising this. I mean, the thing that I think is playing out here is that we're trying to identify as consumers what the right thing for us to do is in this kind of difficult situation where there isn't funding for things that there really should be funding for. And I think that that's where, it's so difficult because I don't have any solutions to that. But I think that what we're talking about is a structural problem where there's still this kind of undervaluing and this reliance on researchers to advocate for the people that they want to engage. And so, I don't really think that there is, I don't think there's a right or a wrong, but I just think that we need to think about, why is this problem happening? And it's happening because there's not sufficient funding, and I can't fix that, and I don't have any advice on that, but it's it's something that I think is coming up. So look, if it's okay, we've got a couple more questions in the chat, and I noticed that Megan's just popped her hand up.
Can I just say something, Tess, just
yeah,
quickly?
go ahead. Yeah.
We talk about Aboriginal people saying that they are the most researched people in the world, and the parts of them were taken overseas, and they're only just now being brought back. We haven't done that with people with mental health diagnoses, lived experience people. So there's certainly been researched over and over. So yeah, I think if we keep it in mind that it would be insulting to Aboriginal and First Nations people. So yeah, let's try and do what is best practice.
Yeah. So I might go. Sorry, I might answer this question from Morgan that's been in the chat, and then Megan will go to you next. So the question from Morgan is, I know you've said that co-design means 50-50 shared decision making, but in my engagement table, I said that co-design, so me, that is at the beginning of the project, and Morgan's just trying to clarify. I think what Morgan's saying is that they want to clarify that tension where I was like, co-design should be from the start, but here's this example where we didn't do it from the start. And so I think that's an excellent question. And so I think I want to have a go at that one first, and then Ailsa, if you have anything to add. But I don't think that what we did was best practice. I think we were really lucky that the group decided it was co-design at the end, and we had to make a lot of concessions for that. But I think what is best practice is engaging people from the very beginning. And what I think I was trying to do was offer this, example of like, here's a solution for if that's not possible for you, or, here's a way you can kind of turn it around. Is that, I can see you nodding, Morgan. Is that what you were getting at?
Yeah, no, I was also just asking in terms of co-design from the beginning, but not just at the beginning. So I guess my question was more around the level of engagement throughout the life of the project as well, in order for it to be meaningful. So not just involving at the beginning, but does that mean ongoing involvement throughout the duration of the project, or is it sort of sufficient to have that engagement at the beginning and then like multiple contact points, say to, validate or talk through findings and see how that kind of resonates with the lived experience experts.
Yeah. So I mean, with the Consumer Resource Project, we met monthly, and we had people doing work the whole way through. Like Ailsa said, they were doing analysis, they were doing in the literature review, they did screening. But all of that stuff was kind of optional. I think that really helped people to feel involved. But I also think that what we're really kind of talking about is having people at those decision-making levels. And I think that, there are more decisions at the start, but you need to keep people engaged. in all the decisions the whole way through, because, you know, like I remember we were doing the analysis, and I was talking about side effects coming up, and Ailsa, I hope it's okay to share this, but Ailsa pulled me up and was like, people aren't talking about side effects. This is what the medication is supposed to be doing. And so because she was there at that point, which was quite, you know, right in the end of the analysis, because she was there, I was like, oh, this is actually like, I have misunderstood what is happening here. Yeah, did you want to add anything to that, Ailsa?
Just the feedback loops are the best thing to actually have things rounded off and understand what differences have happened as a result of you being involved as a lived experience person. It just means that you feel like you've done something worthwhile and the relationship is rounded off too.
Yeah, I think that was a big part, that I was able to come back to you guys and be like, this is what I did that was based on your advice.
And then I promoted it everywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you did. Yeah.
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 Megan, did you want to answer? Sorry, did you want to ask your question? Thanks for your patience.
Yes, thank you. Firstly, I just wanted to say that there's no shame if it's not co-design. Community involvement, you know, it's never too late. And I think researchers get a bit tied up in the word co-design, but better to involve community at some point than no point. But my big bugbear at the minute is don't call it co-design if it's not co-design. But I was just going to say, based on something on the funding discussion that you were talking about, is that I think there's a big, and I've written it in the thing, but I think there's a big lobbying piece to be done. The NHMRC and the MRFF are expecting community and consumer engagement now, but they're not allowing suitable time, suitable funds, and there's no pre-funding to allow you to have community and consumer involvement. And I think we need all of us who believe in this space to be advocating to the funding bodies that if they expect this, then they need to make it
Possible.
doable.
Yeah.
No, I think you're
Really
absolutely
good
right.
points,
I'm putting
Megan.
that on myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Felicity, did you have a question?
Yeah, hi. So I was just thinking about, I guess, work that I've done previously that's involved community or co-design. And I was wondering if anyone has any handy kind of guides or resources for doing it, making sure that everything's like appropriately trauma informed. I was lucky enough to have a social worker and a counsellor present in that work, but I think that, you know, doing it on my own, despite what you put in your ethics applications, can sometimes seem a little bit daunting, just because, you know, people's experiences obviously come up when you're interacting with them, and sometimes that can obviously trigger things. And so, yeah, if anyone's got any guidance, or if you could even talk through if you had an approach to that.
Do you want to start off?
No, you go ahead.
So the trauma-informed training package for the With You project for the legal people has some tips in there. Also, if you look online, there is ways to support people, grounding techniques, etc. When you do a safety sheet which lists organizations and counseling services to send people to, please don't forget that people have family and friends and supports. Put that first before you put Lifeline or whatever, because that's where most people get their supports. And we're often not more fragile, we're actually stronger than most, because the sorts of harms we've experienced in sometimes treatment itself means that we have strategies and ways around becoming wobbly as a result. And I guess the responsibility for our well-being can be solely ours. As a researcher, you can write that into your consent forms. You don't actually, obviously your ethics is not going to let you get through with something deliberately harming somebody, like Deacon's torture experiments that they did years ago. But yeah, I think keeping in mind that there's a way to go about it, that it becomes a shared responsibility and a shared knowledge and a shared humanity, rather than us and them, and they're the ones that are more likely to go off. You know, we're actually one in two of us is going to have a mental health condition in their lifetime. So if it's not you, it's the person sitting next to you, you know? Mm.
Great,
Sorry, I'm
thank
just
you. I guess it's just around, I guess, because obviously when you know, you're doing, well, strictly data collection, you'll have your distress protocol and everything like that. But yeah, making sure that all the way throughout the process you're sort of adhering to that as well is kind of where I was. But yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. And I see some great people have put some things in the chat as well. So thank you so much for that, everyone.
Yeah, I was going to say as well, France Bright has put in some excellent resources from Joe Farmer, who was here earlier. So I would really recommend, I mean, yeah, this problem, it's something I've thought about. It's also something I've been working through at the moment, where I'm running a mentoring program to increase people's lived experience capacity for working with lived experience experts. And you know, everything kind of was fine. And then we had someone who works with domestic violence survivors say that, you know, they had real concerns because of some of the specific challenges that group have that other groups might not have. And, you know, I mean, it was in that instance, I met with the person and we amended the program. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm not an expert on that. I'm still learning myself. But Ailsa, yeah. Ailsa, I think what you said about in the mental health context was really appropriate.
Yeah, I'm reading the chat, and is that Tanya Park that commented there? If it is, have associated with you a few times. But yeah, I think the idea of the difference between AOD and mental health is kind of interesting too. I would like to think that the idea of abstinence or harm minimization is transferable, but the harm minimization doesn't necessarily apply to mental health. We actually talk abolition and adherence, I think. Yep.
Also, I think, do we want to finish there? Because I'm just conscious that it's just gone time. I think we've
Yep.
answered everyone's questions, but if we haven't, I'll pop my email in the chat again. You can reach out to me. Is that okay, Steph? Sorry,
Yeah,
Stephanie,
I was just
taking
about
over
to
the
say,
chat.
yeah, it's 5 o'clock. No. It's 5 o'clock SA time anyway. Yeah, no, thank you, Ailsa and Tessa, both of you, for your presentation today and answering everybody's questions. Greatly appreciated. And yes, if Tessa has put her contact details in the chat, so she's happy to answer any questions. In that case, I'll leave it there. Thank you all, everybody, for your time.